Hey there, folks. Welcome to Flying with Will. I am Will, and today I am welcoming someone rather special to the podcast. Elizabeth Noble, I've gotten to know over the years as a mom to a friend of mine, but she has quite a story to tell. At least I think so. But I'm going to give it over to her. I'm going to let her give you an idea of what I'm talking about. So, Elizabeth, if I could ask you just to give us an idea of who you are, just the basic who I am. Yeah, just let us get to know you a bit more.
Okay, I'm a mother of 8 children. I'm a grandmother of I've lost count, and a great grandmother. And I have been widowed twice. I was born in Texas and have lived in several different states. So right now I'm living with my next to the oldest daughter and her husband in San Angelo, Texas. We've been with them for going on 5 years now. We moved in with them after my 80th birthday, and I'm going to be 85 in September.
Wow. Well, all my life, I've really enjoyed spending time and listening to the stories that people of a certain age had to tell.
You mean us old folks?
Yes, you could say that. You old folks, you guys have a lot more to offer than you give yourselves credit for. Let me tell you. So to just put this all in perspective, I went to boarding school, and back in the day, we had a matron at our boarding school who pretty much took care of all us young men in the hostel. It was one of my favorite pastimes to skive off of watching a rugby match and rather to go and sit and have tea and biscuits with her and just listen to her stories. Her name was Mrs. Omani. I didn't know her by any other name. I was a little young then to be so forward as to use her first name. But Mrs. Omani was quite a lady, and she would tell me stories about things like when the Blitz was happening during the Second World War in London. And when she was then, well, for want of a better word, conscripted to make sandwiches and tea and take them out into the street to where these young soldiers were manning the floodlights to try and find where these German bombers were coming over. These things apparently were so hot that you could only stand within a certain radius of them for risk of third-degree burns. But she would put on a hard hat, as one might imagine. I mean, there are bombs raining down on you for real. Run out and give these young guys some relief of some sort. You know, this is a very stressful time, obviously, in the world's history, but I can only imagine what it must be like for a young guy of what, 18, 19, 20 years old, risking his life for his country, literally. It's
Quite
something I
interesting.
don't think the modern generation gets. I don't think we have got any appreciation of that at all.
Right.
But to kind of link you into that story, you were alive during those times.
Yes, I was. And my uncle may have been one of the ones she fed cookies and tea to. I had
Wow.
an uncle in London during the war, and I don't know how long he was there because I was like 4 or 5 years old. But he was there. He met a young lady in England. He fell in love. And I think that if the war hadn't been over and he came back home and met another girl, I would have had an English aunt, but he didn't marry her, so he came back home.
Elizabeth, you've got to understand. I'm coming at this from the position of someone, obviously a lot younger. I turned 50 this year, and to me, that is quite a daunting prospect. But you have been a first-hand witness to most of what came along in the 20th century,
True.
which, well, not to try and paint it in any light that it isn't deserving of, it basically then you've seen what has shaped our culture. And I think I said this to you once before in our previous conversations. If I picture one of those old time Life magazines, you know, the famous pictures that you always kind of point to and go, you know, these iconic kind of pictures, and
Right.
you point at those, I wouldn't be half surprised to find you in one of them.
Well, I wasn't.
But I mean, you did tell me the story of the serviceman who bought you the milkshake. Perhaps you want to
I did.
just dust that one off for us, for those who are listening, because, you know, obviously those who will come after to listen to what we have to say today haven't had the privilege of having been able to listen to your stories before.
Well, okay, I'll just tell you, when I was probably 4 or 5 years old, my grandparents moved to San Diego, California to do their part in the war, because both of their sons were overseas. One was in the Navy and he was in the Pacific War, and the other one was in London. We went to San Diego, where my grandparents worked in Consolidated Air Lines. I don't remember, but they built planes to be used during the war. My grandmother was what they now call Rosie the Riveter, because she worked on the building the planes and everything. And I really don't remember what my grandfather might have done, but he worked for the same company. And so we went to California after they moved there, because my parents divorced. And my mother and my aunts all went downtown in San Diego just to sit and watch the soldiers, sailors meandering around. And one time they had taken my brother and I. And so they noticed that this group of soldiers or sailors, or maybe both, I don't remember, was watching us. And finally the guys worked up enough courage to come over and speak to them. And they went on about how pretty I was and everything. And they wanted to know if my mother would allow them to take me to the drugstore, which was catty-cornered across from where they were. And I still can't believe that, living in this day and time, that my mother would have let 5 or 6 or more soldiers or sailors take her little girl across the street to a drugstore, but she did. And they set me up on the counter at the drugstore, asked me what I wanted. I could have anything I wanted. I remember I got a chocolate milkshake, and for some unknown reason, I must have liked chocolate covered raisins then, because they bought me chocolate covered raisins, and I can't stand them now. But they then took me back and thanked my mother, you know, for letting them, because I reminded them of either their daughter or their sister or some little girl in their lives, and it made them feel more at home. And so I played a part in World War II, I guess. I also remember, excuse me, hearing the air raid sirens go on during the night when they had told the people that Japanese submarines had been spotted in the ocean just outside of San Diego. And we always had to have blackout curtains on the windows at night to not have our place known to anyone flying over or anything. And then I remember when the war was over and we came back from California, all the servicemen that were being let loose at that time also were going home. So we were riding on a train from San Diego back to Snyder in Texas. And when we got to El Paso, I guess we had a layover. They must have done that back then too. But the only thing I remember is that it was a crush of people. Just, I was tiny, my brother was just a baby, and we were just being crushed by these soldiers and sailors and other people trying to get back home. And so they told my mother and them that if they weren't with a military person, that we wouldn't be able to get on the train to go back to Snyder. And mother was frantic because there she was with two little kids, and my aunt was with us. And they were going to be stuck in El Paso. And so all of a sudden, this soldier came up, grabbed my mother's arm, and said, "She's with me. This is my wife, and these are my kids." And so he said, "Okay, y'all can go then." And my aunt had been standing back over, and let's see, if I was 4 or 5, she was 14 or 15. And so she went running after them, and she said, "I'm his sister. I'm his sister." So we all got on the train to come back to Texas. So that is my war stories. But anyhow, and then we were back in Texas for the rest of my life, basically.
Well, as I said before, I'm of a certain age, and I think of these things, and I want I try really often to put myself in the position of someone telling that story, right? Now, much like I would imagine many people of my age, we grew up on war movies, and they were a little romanticized, obviously, and you kind of think to yourself, well, war is never really that cut and dried or exciting. It's a nasty business, and there's no real winner at the end. But to have been a part of that, to be a part of history is something which I find quite humbling. I must say, it's in whatever small part I've had it now applied to my life, for example, from where I'm coming from. It's not something I take lightly in terms of retelling of my experiences, because I believe that the generations to come need to be reminded and need to know, because people kind of look at history sometimes and they kind of make it as if it never happened.
Right.
It's like, well, that was sort of way
happen.
back when. Yeah. It's like that'll happen way back when, and it's all nice and all, but it doesn't really apply to us. Well, that's when you start having stuff happen again.
Right. Well,
So
of course, my story about the war times is only as a child. And to me, I wasn't bothered by it because my family protected us from, we didn't know the bad stuff.
No,
We
sure. There's an
in our
innocence there, though, that I would imagine then retelling it. You're telling it from the vantage point of an innocent child, which is
right,
amazing in of itself.
right.
You know, you'll get the
There,
other people who are up to their elbows in all of it, and their story will probably be a very different one
oh yes, it would be.
because
But I do remember one other thing. My grandparents, because they were kind, gentle people, and they wanted to do anything that they could do to help
Mm.
the service people, they opened their home to any soldier, sailor, anybody that wanted to come and have a meal or just have a place to hang out.
Mm.
And this one boy, he was 17 or 18, and he was in the Navy. And I think, but I'm not positive, that he may have been with one of either my uncle or my great uncle that was in the Navy. But yeah, he was with my great uncle. And when he left one day to go back out on the ship, he had always been very attentive to me because I'm sure I reminded him of somebody back home. But he told me when he was leaving, he said, when you grow up, I'm going to come back and we'll get married. You know, it was a big age difference, but I was enamored by him, of course. And I was very saddened because he was on a ship that was bombed and he died at sea. And I have read a story that his brother wrote, though, online, and I thought that they had told me he was buried at sea, but apparently he was buried somewhere else. So, but that's another one of my memories. That's a sad one because
I can only imagine.
he was such a nice guy.
You know, Elizabeth, this one thing I've always admired about America and Americans is how much love you all have for your armed forces,
Oh, we do.
for your service people. And, you know, I've always kind of looked at it like, you guys, I mean, you might not think to say this to people yourselves, but you guys, for all intents and purposes, not only protect the lifestyle that you purport to stand for and all that, but for any of us who claim to love things like freedom and democracy and any of that good stuff, I mean, you're the guys that are standing in the breach for all of us. And I've always looked at America with that kind of an admiration because honestly, I mean, if I look just, you know, in terms of the country that I'm in right now, would I want to join my military to defend my country? I don't think so. But yet I feel an affinity to the American armed forces, not because you're American, but because you stand for the values and for the kind of life that I would want in a world that I would want to live in.
And we try to help the other countries in preserving their freedoms.
Well, that is what it's always meant to me. And right. I'm someone sitting at the southern tip of Africa. So if the message has gotten out to the point where someone like me has that feeling, well, you guys are doing something right.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying that you always get it 100% spot on. You know, there are obviously
nobody does.
Controversial times of history where we could point the finger and say, well, you know, what about that?
Right.
But I think in the grander scheme of things, all told, there's been a lot more good that's been done as opposed to bad, if I could put it in those terms.
Well, I know our intention is always good.
Yeah.
We might go about it in the wrong way or something.
Yeah. No, absolutely. You know, I don't know if you can say this, But for me, every year since I was born to this day, somewhere in the world, someone has been fighting with someone. There's been a war of some description happening.
That's true.
And it's rather sad.
It's very sad. When I look back in history, my own history, I had relatives that were in the Revolutionary War
Wow.
and probably, I guess, any other war that's ever been in America since they came from Ireland and England and places like that.
Look, I know that you guys are a military family, which
Yes, we
already does get a very big tick in my book. You know, I always have said, you know, I'd want to shake the hand of a man that's put on the uniform and stood up for what he believed in, and I've got nothing but respect for that. But if I now look at your lifeline, not so long after the Second World War, we had Korea, right? And
right.
you know, that's
And I had a brother and brothers-in-law that fought in that war.
Have you got any memories of that?
Oh, my brother came back total. Well, no, he was in Vietnam, but he came back just totally ruined mentally and physically. And he died a year ago from the results of that war, because he was in the part where they did the Agent Orange and damaged his lungs. And
Did that go back as far as the 50s, as far as
yeah, that was in 60. He was over there in 66, I think, something like that.
So that sounds more like Vietnam then.
Yes, it was Vietnam.
Yeah, I wasn't aware that Agent Orange was an issue in Korea, but look,
Oh, yeah.
War is war, and it's never pretty.
No.
As much as Hollywood tries to kind of put the lipstick on the pig, as it were, it's
right.
You know, it's never a pretty thing.
Right.
But then I think of other things, you know, if you, I mean, this is becoming a bit of a dour conversation, but I think of some other highlights that you've also been witness to. So can you remember back, for example, when your family got their first car?
First car?
Yeah. What was the experience like driving a car when you were young?
I really don't remember. I know that my dad, my biological dad, had a truck because he delivered gasoline and stuff. I don't remember. Well, I know we didn't have a car before we went to San Diego. And the only time I remember us having a car was when I had my first stepfather. We had a 1941 Buick. And, you know, I'm sure we felt like that was great because other than that, we were walking everywhere. But
so, Elizabeth, I mean, if you compare it then to the day we live in now, where you're buying your 16-year-old a car the day she can drive and off they go. Now you try and compare that to back when you were perhaps 16 years old.
Oh, when I was 14, I got my driver's license.
Wow. How did you manage that?
Well, in school, they taught driver's ed, and we all got our driver's license at 14.
And that was all legitimate. That was all legal.
It was all legal. Wow. And we had 1950 Ford is what we trained in for our driver's test. But
I've said this to you before. You've been driving longer than I've been alive.
Yes, I have.
Yeah,
I have
as a matter of fact, I would imagine quite a bit longer.
70 years.
I don't even know what to say to that. But I can only imagine that the cars that came along must have been
Yeah,
something else. I look at old vintage cars and I love them. I mean, I'm a big fan. I'm a petrol head of note.
right.
So, which is why I'm asking you these questions because I want to know. I mean, so to give someone watching this an idea, a 1950s Buick might be something resembling a tank in their minds compared to what we drive these days.
Right. True. Well,
Uh,
the cars that we had back then had a dimmer switch on the floor that you used with your left foot. You would push the dimmer switch with the left foot. And we shifted gears, you know, and I'm not sure I could drive a car that I had to shift the gears now because I'm way too into this automatic stuff. But a funny story was when I took driver's ed and I was practicing driving with the police, the highway patrolman in the car, I was very, very nervous. And I made a right hand turn and I forgot to straighten the car up and I was headed into a big tree. And the guy he had steering wheel and stuff on his side. So he corrected it for me. And he said, I know that you're going to be taking your driver's test. And if I'm the one that gives you your test, I would not pass you. And I thought, oh my God, I'm never going to get my driver's license. But he wasn't the one that tested me. And I passed the test. And as I said, I've been driving for 71 years now, probably. And I've never had a wreck that I caused. I have been in a wreck, but it was always somebody that ran into me. And I've only had 3 tickets in my life. So I think that's a pretty good record.
70 years, 3 tickets. I reckon that's not a bad return on investment there.
That's what I think.
I think these days the kids get 3 tickets in a year, let alone 70 years.
Well, 3 tickets in a week sometimes.
No. So you've seen then how just something as random as what we might assume driving to be has changed. I mean, would you still drive stick today? I know that all the youngsters are dead scared of driving stick.
I don't think I could. I know the mechanics of it, but I'm not sure I could do it.
Is that just a confidence thing?
Maybe.
Okay, fair enough.
I might could do it. It would take me a little while to get used to it again. But I mean, I know what I would do or how to do it. It's just that I'm not comfortable doing it anymore.
Oh, well, I mean, let's face it, why do it if you don't have to, right?
That's true.
And I think you've probably driven enough stick to qualify as one that could probably be given a bit of time off from that.
Oh, true. But not only a car. I talked to Angela several times about how much things have changed since I was growing up. A telephone in my early years hung on the wall. You took the hook off of it and held it up to your ear, which connected to the telephone office. And the operator, I guess, got a light or something showing that someone was on, and she'd say, "Number, please." And you would tell her who you wanted to call. And so I've gone from that to walking around with my iPhone, and I'm just, I use a telephone now. I don't think so. I'm too into an iPhone.
That's insane. Look, I remember radial phones, those ones that you kind of
Oh
dialed in
yeah,
a
we have one
circle.
of
And
those too.
but those were like coming a few years after what you're describing. What you're describing sounds something akin to stuff that Alexander Graham Bell might have used. I mean,
Probably
it kind of does sound like that.
it does, doesn't it?
But then, I mean, just then things like computers. I mean, we're talking now on
Right.
computers, and we literally are having a conversation from halfway around the world from one another.
Right.
So then compare that to when I was a kid, you could get what they called a pen friend. And you would literally by hand, mind you, write your pen friend in whatever country they were somewhere
Oh,
around
you're
the world.
talking about a pen pal.
Pen pal, that's the one.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you might get a response once a month.
Right.
So today with email and all that sort of thing, I don't think youngsters today have got any idea how easy they have it in
Oh
terms
no,
of
they
communicating.
can't possibly. I
No,
know when we got our first computer was, let me think, back in 1980 something, maybe. And the kids, they got this game. What was it? No, it's that one where the little thing goes down and
Pong.
Tetris.
Oh wow,
And
yes.
and they were trying to show me how to do it, and my brain just wouldn't comprehend, and I'm sitting there trying, and then, mother, do this, do this, do this. And I remember taking the mouse, I guess it was, and I threw it down on the floor and I said, you can keep this damn computer. I'll never be able to use it. And now that's my thing, I do everything on the computer or on my iPhone. And I thought, I'll never learn how to use this stupid stuff. But I have.
Yeah, quite well, I would imagine. If I think in terms of, I know, for example, you're very keen on your family tree and
Yes.
on the origins of it all. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I have gone back 5 generations, but I can't get any further than that on one of the ones that I'm really looking for is my maternal grandparents'
So who would
side.
that be?
My grandfather, McElroy's father, on his line, they came over from Ireland in the 1700s. But I can't get back farther than 1751 when they were in York County, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And that is one thing that really bugs me because I want to get back further. And somebody on Ancestry.com claims to have gone back further, but they really don't have any information except a name that they've just, I think, conjured up from somewhere. And I want actual proof. So
Okay.
until I have the actual proof, I don't know anything back further than 5 generations on that line.
Well, I'll say this, that I'm not quite at the level in terms of being a podcaster, if you could call it that, as some are. But what we are discussing today may well fall on the ears of someone who may actually have an answer for you.
That
So
would be great.
Mackleya from Ireland. We're
Right.
looking for you. If you have any concrete proof evidence, Mackleya from Ireland. We are looking
Yes,
for
but
you.
it may not be actually Macklemore because I have found so many different spellings just in census records.
Hmm.
You know, because it's not an easy name. Capital MC,
Hmm.
capital ELYEA. And I think I have found 30 different ways that this name has been spelled.
Wow.
So it's just
I know, for example, that many of the immigrants to America ended up changing their names for whatever reason.
right.
So what it started out as and what it is now might not line up, but then it doesn't have to. As long as one can join the dots, right?
Right.
And that makes
It was
sense.
actually the person that I found in 1751 said that they were from Northern Ireland,
Okay.
but you know, Northern Ireland is a big place. You don't know which one of the areas in Northern Ireland,
Yeah.
and I haven't been able to verify anything past 1751 in records. But
Well, we put it out there, right? So let's see what
right.
may come back. You never know.
That would be great.
This is a big world we live in, and there's a lot of people in it. So here's crossing my fingers.
True.
Elizabeth, something else that I wanted to talk to you about, because I know that you mentioned this to me a little while back. I've at the risk of putting on my tinfoil hat right now, I've always been very interested in the not so mainstream type stories. I mean, I'm not going to go as far as to say conspiracies, right? Because then I am putting on a tinfoil hat. But things that people don't talk about in terms of, let's say, what people take seriously. Like you won't, for example, you won't hear us about some stuff on the news. I know I'm being a bit vague and cryptic, but please bear with me. So I've always been fascinated by things like, for example, space travel. And America has always been kind of at the forefront of that.
Right.
Now, you've had a few interesting experiences, I'm told, just in one way or another related. And I'm curious. You mentioned to me once about having a moment where your car stopped in the middle of nowhere for no apparent reason.
Yes.
I'm going to flesh that out because I'm so curious. I gotta know what happened.
Well, I really don't know what happened. We were driving back from El Paso, which is like in Texas. Texas is, well, Alaska claims to be the biggest state, but of course it's covered in ice. And if you melted all the ice, we would still be the biggest state. But from El Paso to our hometown is like a 300 and something mile drive. And we were coming at night, and my husband was asleep in the car, and I was driving. And all of our kids were asleep. So we're driving on this road in the mountain area, and I'm driving along, and all of a sudden my car just stops. The lights go off. I can't make it go or anything, and I am totally freaking out. People have told me, well, you probably just dozed off and you don't really remember it. And maybe I did. I don't know. But it seemed real to me. And after I woke my husband up and we sat there for 15 to 20 minutes, and it the car wouldn't start. And then all of a sudden I tried it and it started. And we went on home.
So that's not like you ran out of gas or something. This is
No. It just died. All the lights went out, everything. It was just pitch dark.
now. You see that this gets my juices flowing because I kind
It's
of wonder.
mind-boggling.
I kind of have to know. I'm wondering here what could, and what are we talking now in terms of year? I mean, when was this exactly?
It was back in the 1970s.
Okay.
Angel was born in 71, so it was in that time frame.
So we're talking about the era of, let's say, the Apollo project, that sort of thing.
Possibly, yeah.
So that would kind of lead me to think if it was something from up there, it wasn't one of ours, as they say.
No, probably not. And it was in the area close to where what's that place called in
You're talking about Roswell.
yeah. It was on the same plane as that, but probably over 100 miles or so away.
Yeah, well, we know 100 miles in the grander scheme of things is not that far at all.
No. So was it little green man up there that turned off all my lights, or was it just a fluke and I went to sleep and
you never thought to perhaps get out of the car and look up?
are you crazy? I wasn't gonna get out of the
Some
car
have
in the middle.
accused me of a lot worse. So yeah, probably.
No, I didn't think about getting out of the car and looking around. I was too afraid. But
I can't even imagine what I would be doing in that particular scenario. I mean, I'd love to be all gung ho and say, yeah, of course I'd get out the car. Of course I'd be looking around.
yeah,
But when you're that person and you're there, I can't imagine that is the way that cookie crumbles, as they say.
it was terrifying.
I can only imagine. Wow. I mean, they make movies about this stuff. You do know that, right?
No,
They really
never
do.
entered my mind.
Yeah. No. Well, I'm not saying that you should go and apply yourself in Hollywood or anything, but what I'm saying is that your stories are quite remarkable.
Well, thank you. It's just been my life.
Yeah, but that's exactly my point. To you, it's just your life. To me, I'm kind of sitting here with my jaw hanging on the floor. Okay, so let's just sort of fast forward a little further there. Now, there was this era. I mean, for example, my first crush was on Marilyn Monroe, and of course, I was very heartbroken to discover that she died almost 10 years prior to my being born.
Mm-hmm.
Because I just thought that lady had everything in all the right places.
Right.
But it was an era that was also marked by the other side of things, the politics and the what would you call it? I mean, you heard about things like the Cuban Missile Crisis, and you heard about things like the JFK assassination, and again, it's something that I can only try and imagine being witness to that, because I can only imagine that the fear that you lived under in those times was very real.
Well, the JFK thing was terrible in itself, but the fact that it happened in Texas, I mean, I was standing at the ironing board, ironing a shirt for my husband, where we could go to his uncle's funeral. And they came on that on the TV saying that. And I thought, oh my God, no, not in Texas. You know, it could have happened anywhere else, but not in Texas. I was just beside myself that we in Texas have had to live with that, you know, that Kennedy was killed here in Dallas. That was a very sad time.
I can only try and imagine. It's again, you know, we've never had political figures in my country that were as well loved as
Right.
what he was. I mean, to this day, if you talk about Kennedy, you know, people approach that with a certain feeling. There's a certain kind of a sense of general loss, even if you're not even of that generation, because you kind of
Right.
piggybacking off your parents and your grandparents.
Right. Well,
And
the sad thing though now is that a lot of his life has kind of dimmed in a way because of things that it is purported that he did and had affairs and stuff like that. And back then, to us, he was the ultimate, you know, could do no wrong or anything. And
oh, sure.
it is sad that it has been proven that he was not the Prince Galahad or whatever that we've all thought that he was at that time.
Well, look, I think if you look at the time, the expectation, I think, was a bit higher than what it is today.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
in my own lifetime, I can talk about a guy like Bill Clinton, who probably has gotten up to just about the same sort of stuff and then some.
Exactly.
And somehow he comes out squeaky clean.
Not in my book.
No, well, sure. I mean, but what I'm saying is he's not picking up any sort of stick in terms of the backlash
Right.
compared then to Kennedy and the disappointment, as you've said yourself, that you
Right.
feel, because I would imagine there's a certain sense of what, betrayal almost? Is that too
Yes,
strong a word?
exactly. That would be a good word.
Yeah. Because yeah, well, look, politicians are politicians. Look, none of them are to be trusted, right? We kind of know that.
I'm
But
beginning to really believe that.
yeah, but what I'm saying is that back in those days, you held them to a higher
Standard.
station, a higher calling.
Mhm.
You expected more.
Right.
I don't know when it started, when politicians could be so brazen and so bluntly just a bunch of crooks. I don't actually know. You know, you might point to someone like Richard Nixon. And again, what exactly was the big deal about Watergate? So they broke in somewhere and they stole a few files, and that was this huge thing. If you consider then what's happened since then, and what has been, well, to my mind, just let slide.
Right.
Yeah, one could be forgiven for thinking that Richard Nixon had a raw deal.
Right.
Look, I'm playing devil's advocate here. I mean, I'm not saying what he did was right or wrong or any of it, because I mean, I've seen bits and pieces. I've tried to patch it together, but I think he resigned before anyone really figured out how deep that rabbit hole actually went.
My belief is that politics in itself is just a bunch of cover up. I'm not even sure that the people that do some of this stuff even realize what they're doing. They're just there to make the money, to have the prestige, and they just don't get what being a president or senators or judges or whatever are supposed to be. They are supposed to be our squeaky clean leaders that are really trying their very best to guide America and keep us safe and to help other countries and stuff. But they're not. They're just rolling in the dough, and they go to other countries and they backstab us, and they're backstabbing the country that they go to.
Mm.
So I'm not too much on politics right now.
I don't blame you. Look, I find it fascinating purely because it's a bit like why someone would watch a show like Survivor. You'd want to look away, but you also want to know what happens next.
Right, right.
Now, I don't think you'll mind me saying, I mean, I know that you're a Christian and that you're a believer as I am. And I can only speak for myself, but I've always held myself to a certain standard. I've said this a few times before. I don't lie. I will never lie to you or anyone else, even if it means it makes me look bad, because I'd
Right.
rather you know the truth about me than think I'm something that I'm not.
Right.
My conscience wouldn't. I don't know. It's a Dostoevsky thing, maybe. I'd get it. The crime and punishment of it all. But then I look at how the world works, and you just can't help but be a little disappointed.
I'm very disappointed.
You know, if you meet people, and like we are having this conversation now, and you get kind of a glimpse into who that person is, it's always very, I mean, I find it very, very, very rewarding, and I'm fascinated by people's stories and, you know, people's beliefs and what led them to have those beliefs. But then you get this whole thing of the tribes, right? So,
Right.
for example, in America, you'll have your Democrats and you'll have your Republicans, and for many of them, it's, you know, never the twain shall meet. And somehow,
Right.
if you're red, then you're red till you're dead, and if you're blue, then, you know, it's much the same. I would imagine as a Christian that I wouldn't much care who was my president as long as they were a good person,
That's true.
as long as they were doing what they said they would be doing, which is, in other words, looking out for my best interest.
Honest people.
Yeah, yeah. When they say something, you can take that to the bank. That kind of person.
Back in the old West, a handshake was a man's
I'd imagine that's your bond, right?
yes,
Man's word
yes.
is his bond. That's the old saying.
Right.
And you know, I've always maintained, I think I was born way too late in the game. I would have probably done a lot better being born somewhere closer to when you were born, frankly, even before that, even maybe. Purely because I've always felt that those times were simpler. Look, I'm not naive enough to think that it was any less violent and vile, and that there were the bad parts of it that were in every way just as horrendous as what we experience today. In fact, probably worse. If you consider how the world has recovered from, let's say, abject poverty, for example.
Right.
Where 100 years ago, 80% of the world lived on the breadline, and today it's a fraction of that. But we still do have poverty, and we still do have hunger, and we still think that the industrial military complex and all the money they spend every year on bombs and bullets could have solved that problem many times over by now. But then again,
Right.
that's my bleeding heart liberal side coming out. So, you know, there's that. I do love my fellow man. I'd love seeing other people get ahead. I love it when good things happen to good folks, if I can put it like that. But if you just turn on your television now on any given evening and you watch the news, there's very few good news stories.
That's true.
I've never
But
understood.
I will say, a lot of the good news stories are not shown.
Hmm.
Because the news is so into the bad stuff. Because I guarantee you, they will hop right on the bandwagon for so and so shot a black guy, but you know, a white guy can get shot and they don't even say anything about it. And that is bad. But it is just, it's now it's got its pitted race against race, which I guess it's always been that way. But I don't like that. I like to think that the black people, the white people, the red people, the yellow people, whatever, we're all creations of God. And we all have a place in this world. And we're no different, really. Yes, they may be a different color. Yes, they may eat different food, but they're still the same people that God made. And that's what bothers me, that we don't see that anymore. It's just, I don't know.
Would you say, and here you could tell me if you feel it's a new thing or not, but would you say that things like what you see on television is in a way overtly somehow trying to stoke fear in people?
Yes, I do.
Why would you think that is?
I have no idea. I don't know why they would be doing that, but I do believe that that is true.
And the reason I'm saying this,
I believe that they're trying to pit people against each other.
you know, Elizabeth, the reason I'm saying this is I know a guy in America. He's coming out of the background of being a hedge fund manager, a very, very wealthy man. But his son was shot by a policeman, white guy. So you're looking at a guy with all the means and, you know, whatever you might want, but going through exactly the same thing as someone like a George Floyd and their family may have gone through, which is to say something that should never have happened.
Right.
But as you say, George Floyd becomes a worldwide sensation. And
Right.
this man, I've never heard the news, his name on the news once.
Well, there was just recently, within the last 2 or 3 weeks, a black man was driving his car. I don't remember what supposedly they stopped him for, but he hadn't really done anything, or I never heard that he had done anything wrong. And 5 policemen literally beat him to death on the street. And I'm thinking, oh my God, these white police guys, blah, blah, blah. Until I saw the news and it was 5 black guys beat another black guy to death. And I'm thinking, what in the world? And there was no, you know, it's just gone now from the news. It's like,
would you say then that the problem perhaps is not so much a race culture problem as what it is a police culture problem?
I think the police do have a lot of problems, but we've all got a lot of problems, truthfully.
No, absolutely, that's fair. But what I wanted to say was that I understand that the job that they do is high pressure, and I understand that the job that they do is often fraught with danger.
Right.
But at some point, you've got to kind of just take a step back and go, hang on, the shoot first, ask questions later approach is not going to get us to where we
No.
want to be. And I mean, look, we at one point in my country had a situation where we had they call them what, police commissioner or police minister or something like that. And this was some years ago, where this guy came out and he said, if someone shoots at a police officer, at that point, it's all, you know, all bets are off.
Yeah.
In other words, shoot to kill. And he literally came out and said, shoot to kill. And there was such a backlash. There was such a societal kind of uproar because of his language.
Right.
But then I think to myself, but if someone pulls a gun on me, then I'm thinking, you better damn well shoot me, because if you don't, then you're done.
Well, I think that the whole world now just has a different feeling about other people. I mean, it's like, you know, they're not my relative. I don't care. You know, they can get shot. They can fall off the face of the earth. If they're starving to death, I'm not going to feed them. And I don't like that. I still feel like we should be helping each other. And thankfully, yes, I am a Christian, and I do a lot of things at church to help other people. We have a jail ministry that we make cards for and donate for things like that. And it's just, you know, I think everybody needs to get into helping others, because I remember when I was a kid, if people didn't have money, they would go around offering to work, you know, let me mow your lawn. Is there something I could do to clean your house or something, just to get food? And nowadays, they're going to steal it. They don't care anymore. It's just, it's a culture of everything that somebody else has, I need, and I'm going to take it. And that's a bad situation.
Look, I mean, my childhood years were pretty much the 1980s. And back then it was, you know, you got on your bike and you went around with your friends, and you would still do what you're describing.
Right.
Because that's how we were raised.
Right.
You would respect a policeman. You would respect your teacher in high school. You would respect your parents. And you'd have a feeling of contributing. You'd have a feeling of, as you say, doing for your fellow person. Whereas I think now we've gotten to the point where the entitlement has kind of taken over.
Yes,
and I'm not poking the finger at America at this point, because we've got it just as bad as you guys have. Where it's all about me, myself, and I, and how dare you offend me, and you know, that kind of a narrative. And I feel somehow that we've lost something.
Well, I know when America lost theirs, or at least in my opinion, is when Madalyn Murray O'Hair was able to, I don't know how, get the law passed that you can't pray in schools. Because when I grew up, when my kids were growing up, my older kids, they had a Texas flag and a United States flag in every classroom. They said the Texas pledge, they said the United States pledge, and they said a prayer every single day.
Yeah.
Now, nobody prays in school. Nobody pledges to the flags. What's that all about? You know,
Yeah.
that's where we have lost everything.
Yeah.
And I really do believe that time is what changed the whole world.
Well,
It's when people.
Mr. Zed, the fact you remember the person's name.
Oh, I remember. I will remember
Highlights
her name.
How profound that is. Yeah. No, absolutely.
But the sad thing is, I named my youngest daughter Madeline. And I think, though, that Madeline Murray O'Hare was after my Madeline. But I'm not sure. But I named my Madeline after my doctor's wife because she asked me to name her Madeline because she wanted a child named after her. And we were very close, and I did. And now every time I think about my daughter's name being the same, I think, oh my God, I wish I could go change her name. But I wouldn't do that because that's her name. But
Yeah.
I really do. I really do believe in my heart that when God and prayer and everything was taken out of schools and courtrooms and this and that, is when the country started downhill. Because we don't have a higher beat.
We've got a similar story to tell here. Obviously, we come out of a bit of a different history than what you guys had. The apartheid years in South Africa obviously are definitely not something that anyone wants to repeat and see repeated. But sadly, we threw the baby out with the bathwater.
Right.
Because we became now this secular, licentious type of a society, where before you could say that we were nationalists, but we were also very Christian. What you've described, the whole assembly in the morning and saying the Lord's Prayer and observing your flag and that sort of thing, we haven't seen that since the years of apartheid.
Right.
And I think we missed the trick.
I think we've all, the world.
If we just gotten rid of what was bad, but yet kept that which was good, I think we'd be a lot further ahead than what we are now. Because unfortunately now the story is all about corruption and about mismanagement, and it breaks my heart because I really do love my country. But right now we don't have leaders in this country. We have got criminals, and that's it.
Right.
And that's very sad because it's not the story I would want to tell. It's not something that I would want to tell someone like yourself from another country, to say, you know, this is my country and here's our story. I'd love to be able to edify my country and put it up there and say, you know what, we're just as great as anyone else.
Right.
But sadly, I can't do that. I just can't.
I would like to go back to the time where people could feel safe in their homes, in their town, driving down the street, where girls knew they were girls and boys knew they were boys. And you didn't have to. I heard a grandmother yesterday on a prayer meeting say that her grandson was out in California. I don't remember where she was from. But people out there were telling him that he was bad and he had the devil in him and he should go kill himself. And she is so concerned about this. And you hear this all the time. I mean, there have been stories on TV where girls beat other girls to death for what reason? I don't understand. It's just, it's crazy. We're living a life of sin and crazy people. And yes, there are still good people, but you kind of have to look sometimes to find them. But,
Well, God bless them one and all, because honestly, we need them at this point. And we need them in your country when we certainly need them in mine. But Elizabeth, wow, we haven't even talked about a fraction of what we could have talked about, but it's been about an hour and time has pretty much
been
flown.
well over an hour, I think.
But I just want to say thank you so much for agreeing to come on and tell us a little bit about the good old days. And they were the good old days, because, wow,
Well,
like
you're
say yourself.
welcome. And I guess this has been so painless. I guess if you want to do it again sometime, I'd be willing.
I'll let you know, definitely.
All right.
And again, I would say to anybody watching right now, if you do have any information regarding the McElyays and whatnot, then please, by all means, we'll put Elizabeth, your Facebook details. We'll add them into the description so that they can hit you up on Messenger or something should they have anything to say to you. But
Okay.
folks, wherever you are in the world right now, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Be safe, be well.
And God
Bye-bye.
bless.
That too.